Welcome, everybody, to Retired Out Army, where we talk about retirement, transition, and all things revolving around retirees coming from the military going to the civilian life. I'm happy to have with me today Andres Blandon. He is a military veteran, owner of signaljobs.org, and an IT professional with various CompTIA and Cisco technical certifications. He joined the Army out of high school in 2003 and separated in 2013 for a total of 10 years of service. He's a combat veteran deployed to Iraq in 2009 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's also spent a few years in South Korea, Pacific area. After the military, he graduated from Florida International University in 2015 with a bachelor's and a master's degree in IT security. He's worked with many companies since getting out of the military, to include some such as Tyco, Johnson Controls. He worked with the DoD as a senior network engineer on the GATE project, and Verizon, supporting Department of Homeland Security and TSA. In 2018, he started Signal Jobs, realizing that veterans were struggling to transition out of the service and missed out on many opportunities for lack of separation. So he created the community for a way to connect with veterans and connect veterans to opportunities in the IT industries. He's currently located in the Orlando, Florida area with his wife and his 3 boys. So with that, welcome to the show, Andres.
Hey, John. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here and being able to share some of my experiences transitioning out of the service.
Yeah, I thank you for your time. And I know this is a big time obligation to do this. So I really, really appreciate that you're taking the time out to do this. It's very kind of you. So let's actually start from a weird place, since we talked about it a little bit before recording. Um, what does your current morning, say 30 to 60 minutes morning routine look like versus what it looked like back in your Army career days?
So I'll be honest, John. Right now, my morning routine it's pretty similar to what it was in the military. It wasn't always like that. I think when I left the military, I went from one extreme to the other. I stopped exercising. I stopped really trying to wake up early in the morning. I wanted to take a break from that lifestyle. But I quickly saw the consequence that came with that, right? Of, not really taking care of my body and not taking care of my health, not exercising and really just allowing my brain to kind of get dull on different terms because I wasn't working on my mental, my physical abilities. So I saw myself gaining a lot of weight, as well as feeling more sluggish, having a hard time getting through different things mentally and emotionally. So, it was a bit of a roller coaster, right? I think stress definitely affected me a lot more and a lot easier than it did when I was in the military. I had learned a lot of good skills, but because I didn't have anybody to kind of push me to maintain those habits, it was on all of myself, right? All of my own will to want to do it or not do it. So definitely after about a year and a half to 2 years of not having consistency in the morning routine, I realized that I needed to create a routine for myself, right? For different reasons, right? Now, I have 3 boys, my wife. I definitely want to set an example for them, but I also want to maintain my health so I can stay longer with them as my kids get older, as we look to next steps, next stages of marriage with my wife. And I started reading a lot of books that dealt with health, books that dealt with, mental resiliency. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So now, my current routine, honestly, I wake up between 5 and 5:30 every day. First thing I do is just go out for a jog, or I'll go straight to the gym. I do a lot more, weight training now, a lot less on the cardio, and definitely I like where my performance is at this time. I feel like I can keep up easily, do you know 3 to 5 mile run. I can easily bench press 250 close to 300 pounds. Definitely feel the best stage health wise and performance is now as opposed to in the military. Because in the military, um, again, you're kind of being forced to maintain those routines, not because you have an inward desire to be your best self, but because somebody's pushing you to maintain a minimum standard of performance. You're not necessarily trying your best, you're just trying to meet the standard. As opposed to now where I have a desire to do my best for my family, for the people around me, and for those that I want to serve.
Yeah, it's excellent. And like I was telling you, we could probably go down the rabbit hole with that topic. But yeah, thank you for that. That's really good. I think a lot of people do that when they get out of the military, especially retirees. If you've done, 20, 25, 30 years of service, and then you're just like, you know what, I think I'm going to take a sabbatical for however long. I'm actually taking a work sabbatical right now, trying to just go down the paths of what I'd like to do and what makes me feel good mentally, physically, emotionally. So I think those are really important parts. And yeah, I'd love to get into that a little deeper, a little bit further along in the conversation here. So when you first entered the military, can you give me like the context of where you were mentally, possibly physically? I assume it was in Florida, and maybe the self talk you had prior to joining and signing up for the military.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. And throughout high school, the thing about Miami being a big city, a lot of people from different places, different countries, it's a melting pot, right? But with the good and the bad, it's all about who you spend time with. Unfortunately, I was just around a lot of guys that didn't have the right example, the right role models. So, constantly getting into trouble, with either drugs or with girls, drinking. And I found myself just realizing that most of these guys had immediate consequences, right? They either ended up getting locked up for getting in trouble with minor things. Again, if somebody is just into weed or, they're just doing bad things in the streets, get into fights. I didn't want to go down that path. I quickly realized that. And I also didn't want to end up getting some girl pregnant and then having to spend the rest of my life trying to support, paying childcare and, all of that. So the military was kind of the best way to go for me. I never really liked, focusing in school and just sitting down in classroom learning things that might never really apply. So I joined the military right at 18. I actually signed up a year before I graduated. Um, and unfortunately, when it was time to graduate, my boot camp was supposed to start a week early, so I didn't get to walk my graduation. I just packed up my stuff and I left right before I graduated. So got an early start in the military. I realized that having the self-discipline was not something that came naturally, and having other people, drill sergeants, military leaders, push me to become disciplined was something that I realized at an early age. And hopefully over time, I will start to develop that on my own, but definitely using the military as leverage to become a better person was part of that mindset.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that experience that kind of situation, or maybe not the same circumstances, but I definitely had the same kind of feeling when I joined. It was, I need to get out of this place. I'm around bad influences and bad situations that are not going to serve me well in the future. And for whatever reason, my brain took over and led me to the military. So yeah, thank you. And then on the other side of that, when you did decide to get out, what was your reasoning behind that? And was there anything um, planned out after life after the military? Like, did you mentally plan out your path after you left the military, or did you have anything in mind, or did you just kind of wing it?
So honestly, I didn't want to leave the military. I found it that throughout my career, I had some good experiences. I really had an opportunity to travel, to meet different cultures, to see so many things, to learn new skills. But it came a point in time where I had just gotten married with my wife in Fort Bliss, Texas, and this was the second contract that I had. It was right at the end of that contract, and honestly, my priorities kind of shifted. Where initially it was about performing, it was about having the discipline to grow in a specific career, and once I got married and I was about to have a baby, my son Sebastian, it became where I started to think about what would be best for them in the long run as opposed to what would be best for myself. And I realized that if I would have stayed in, the group that I was with was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. You know, I've been married for less than a year. It would have been a lot of stressful situations for my family, for myself not being there to watch my son be born. So it was definitely a tough decision, but I realized that because the military at some point is going to come to its end, right? My career at some point is going to have to finish, but my marriage is going to be way, way beyond my time in the military, right? Hopefully, the idea of getting married is, till death do us apart. And if you truly commit to that, then you're willing to do whatever it takes to make that work. So, that was a big driving factor for me. So I didn't necessarily have a plan. I didn't know what the next steps would be. I just felt a little bit more clarity as to, okay, well, in order to make, family or my marriage a priority, then there's other things that need to be sacrificed. So that's one of the biggest things that led to that.
And then once you got out, what did that first year of transition look like after leaving the military, and even the transition getting out of the military? Were there any difficulties or hurdles that you had to overcome to make that transition possible? But then, like, what did the first year look like after transition?
Yeah, so, for me, during the time that I was transitioning out in 2013, there was some resources. There was an ACAP program that set you up with like a resume, general templates, just ideas about different industries that I could go into. And I had an initial idea of what I wanted to do because during my time in the military, I always saw that the military, the government leverages a lot of government contracts, a lot of professionals to come in, do the service. They come in, they do the job, they go home, and they get paid well for it. So that's the kind of hint that I wanted to have in regards to what's my next step, right? So I had an idea of this is the type of career I want to go into, something that I can do government contracts, just come in, do the job, go home, spend time with the family, get paid well enough to maintain and to provide for them. But I didn't know what it was required to get there. So I thought if I have a government clearance, if I have some experience with IT, as I did being in the Signal Corps, that I was just going to land some kind of job opportunity. What I didn't realize was that the private sector, they don't necessarily go based on the same guidelines. There's federal regulations, DoD 8570, AIT, AIM requirements, where it's information awareness. So you have to be certified. You have to have a certain level of education to meet those standards. Where, as opposed to in the military, that you just show up and you do the work, right? You go through AIT, but anybody can pretty much say, I'm going to take somebody from another team, another company, just bring them into this brigade, bring them into this organization. We're going to train them up and just get the job done. And the civilian sector does not work like that. So I struggled a lot because I kept pushing to get hired for opportunities that I was not qualified for. I didn't meet the education requirements. I didn't meet the certification requirements. Although I had a clearance and I had a good amount of experience, I ended up just kind of banging myself against the wall where I would apply to, 70, 80, 100 different applications throughout the following weeks once I separated, and I wouldn't get any calls back, right? It was like this black hole of career opportunities that I saw, but I couldn't reach or access because for some reason I was never in the top of the list for those candidates that applied. And another thing I didn't realize is that there's there's a big concept of supply and demand. So there's companies that are looking to hire candidates. So there's a limited amount of jobs, and there's a large number of candidates that are applying, right? So there's a big supply of people that are looking for work, specifically a job that's well paid. There's a lot of people that are going to apply, but there's a very limited number of people that are going to get called back, that are going to get that interview, that are going to get that job offer. So not knowing how the process worked, not knowing how to get myself from the bottom of the list to the top of the list was something that hindered my career path for a long time. Essentially, after about 6 months of being in unemployment, of not getting job opportunities, I just said, okay, take a real good look at where I'm at and see what is it that's wrong about why I'm not getting that job opportunity. And I went through a few job descriptions, right? I went online and I just broke it down into what is this job? What are the requirements? What kind of, you know, criteria does my resume show that I have a matching skill set to that job requirement? And if I don't meet the requirement, I'm going to figure out a way to meet it, right? So the job description became my blueprint and my road map to be able to get hired. And this took a long time, right? Because what I realized was they wanted somebody with a bachelor's degree. I didn't have a bachelor's at the time. I didn't have a degree, and I had some college credits from the time in the military, but it wasn't what they were looking for. Then I saw that they wanted somebody with Cisco training, Cisco certifications. That's another thing that I didn't have. So they had a lot of reasons to disqualify me as an applicant that I just didn't want to accept in the beginning. But as I realized that because I wasn't getting callbacks and I wasn't getting interviews, I said, well, the problem is that I don't have that. So let me fix the problem by going out and getting what I need to get in order to qualify, right? And that could be with anything, right? If you want to go into the medical field, if you want to go into IT industry, if you want to go into construction, there's certain skill sets, experience, requirements, training, certifications, and licenses that you're going to be required to have. And the only way to accomplish that goal is to go through and get that training and be able to get certified or get the education and the hands-on experience that you need to get there. So that's what really led me to going back to school. And, in the process, I moved from Texas back to Florida. I applied. Initially, I went through University of Phoenix. Um, I think it's a great program because it actually allowed me to take multiple courses online and in a shorter amount of time, right? Where most of the traditional school would be about 12 weeks at a time, the University of Phoenix allowed me to take classes that were 8 weeks at a time. Now, most schools would say you take 3 to 4 classes. Although online courses, they try to limit you. There's always exceptions to this rule. So I was taking 3 to 4 classes, getting them done in a shorter amount of time, as well as taking CLEP tests and other types of additional training that would allow me to get more college credits. I know that the military has defense language proficiency exams. If you have any other type of language, you can go through the test, you get certified with that additional language. And when you go to college, it actually translates into college credits. So by the time I got started, I had either at an associate level or a little bit higher. And once I got started, within about a year or so, I was able to finish an entire bachelor's degree. Because I was taking additional classes, because I wasn't taking summer break, I wasn't taking, all this additional amount of time that it would take to finish the bachelor's. I was just kind of stacking, all the requirements so I could get it done as soon as possible.
And so going off of that, when you graduated in 2015, correct?
Yes, yes. So, and just to elaborate, I did this for about 2.5 years, right? The first year and a half was doing my bachelor's. Then I transferred to an on-site school, Florida International University, that they had a condensed master's degree program, 12 months, and it was very similar, right? It was you had to take classes online, you had to take classes in the school every Saturday for about a whole year. I was getting lectures from different courses from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. So that whole year, I literally did not take weekends off because I was continually studying, continually trying to get through these courses. And I learned a lot of valuable skills in that process as well, right? It wasn't all on me. I realized that when you go to a higher education program like a master's or somebody that wants to apply to a PhD, there's a very tight group of people that are going through that same process, just like the military, right? When you're going through boot camp, you're going through this process with a specific group of people that are all trying to overcome the obstacles, trying to go through the same training, trying to get those same skills. So I realized initially that I wasn't so familiar with a lot of these concepts about cryptography, about distributed systems computing, about finite math, and I ended up just being honest with myself and with them, and I said, "Hey, I don't understand a lot of these things, right? Like, is there something wrong with my studying process, my understanding of the terms, or and I realized that they were kind of going through the same insecurities and doubts. Like, man, I can't understand what this guy's saying. He's been talking for 8 hours straight, and I barely just got grasp of like the lesson 2 weeks ago. So what we ended up doing was just building a team where we kind of spread out the different lessons into each individual person in the group, and throughout the next couple of weeks, each person would go over one of those lessons, and then we'll meet back the following week, and we would review with each other. Hey, this lesson talks about XYZ, and these are the main points, and this is what we need to learn about this process, right? So we were teaching each other how to get through these courses, where I can honestly say, if it wasn't for those other students or those other teammates that were going through the program with me, I wouldn't have been able to get through it, because it was just such a large amount of information, such a high expectation of what's needed or required. So definitely all the projects, all the studying, everything was like, how can we rely on each other as a team? And that's something I appreciate about the military so much, that it's always about how can I support the person, that's next to me, side by side, as we're looking to meet this goal. How can I help them protect their back, make sure that I'm watching their 360 degrees, but we can't all keep eyes on everything. So we'll break the plane, and we'll cover each other's back so that we're protected at all times.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight, and I know I've ran across it myself. I don't know how many other people have, but you actually learn more by teaching than you do by reading or studying. It's quite, and I think the military does the same, right? We break things up. We have sergeant's time training. I don't know if that's even still a thing or not, but where you take 2, 3, 4 hours, and you actually have individuals within the group teaching a specific skill or a task. Uh, and in the process of doing that, you're actually learning from yourself teaching somebody else. So it's kind of interesting how that works out. But I like that analogy with the team being able to cohesively help each other to achieve the overall goal that everybody's trying to get to, either way, whether you do it by yourself or with a group. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, so after you graduated, what did the progression or the sequence that led you to where you are now look like? Was there a sequence or progression that you could point to or kind of tease out of your path from say 2015 to now?
Yeah, yeah. So, there's some great lessons that were learned in the process, because I was figuring out what things worked and what things didn't. So, as I was going through, my time in school, I was going through pursuing my degree. I realized that once I did meet those requirements for the job post that I had initially looked up 2 years before my graduation, I started getting all these different calls, all these different opportunities. So now it was a different place that I found myself, because in the beginning, before I started pursuing the education, certifications, and training, I didn't have what was required for the jobs. Now, once I actually saw that resume, I said, okay, now I have a bachelor's. Not only do I have a bachelor's, but I have a master's. Now I have the certifications 19. Now I have the experience and the knowledge and the how to. And I just posted my resume out there, Monster or clearance jobs, all these things. So I started getting phone calls and started getting opportunities to go government contracts, to go in the private sector. And a lesson that I learned in that process was that a lot of people pursue success. So they work really hard at one thing and they grind it out because they want to achieve a goal, right? So let's say if you get offered a job, let's just start on the lowest base, right? Let's say it's McDonald's or Walmart or something like that. And people think, oh, I'm going to grind this out so I can get the next pay raise, right? So I can get $1 or $2 more so I can maybe make it to like assistant manager or make it to the next level. But they are never improving their skills, right? So they're working hard at the job, but they're not working hard in themselves. So being able to work on yourself, on your skill set, on your mindset, on your abilities and capabilities, what are you bringing to the table? It's such an important factor at that point because what ends up happening is that, we all have the same amount of time in a day, but the difference is how much value do you bring to that organization within those hours that you're there, right? So why is it, somebody working in a cash register making $12 an hour, but then there's, a store manager that's making probably 35 or $40 an hour, even though you're spending the same amount of time, right? The difference is that the value that they're bringing by being able to provide, projected schedules and timelines and budgets and the skills that that manager has worked on to be able to get a higher compensation, they're worth more to the company. And that's what I realize about any organization that we go into. And unfortunately, I think that's something that the military kind of does not really enforce as much. Ideally, it does that it provides training for a soldier to continue to grow in the ranks, but the mentality behind most of the soldiers is I want to do enough just to get by, right? So at that point, it's like, okay, what is the minimum score I need to get on my PT test? What is the passing score for my qualifications for rounds and training or tests and training and anything else? But again, we don't go above and beyond that. And I was just listening to something recently where somebody says when you work 40 hours a day, you're doing enough just to sustain your living, right? Just to pay your bills, to get the food, to get anything you do above that and beyond. If you spend an extra 10 and 20 hours growing your skill sets so that your value to that organization is going to be higher, that's when you're going to make more, right? That's when you get comfortable, you get that extra promotion, you get that extra paycheck, you get increased opportunities because now you're dedicated not just to the organization as a whole, but you're dedicated to growing yourself. So we don't pursue success, we attract success by becoming something better, by becoming something more valuable as a professional, as it could be an engineer, a construction worker, a foreman, a project manager. Again, you want to work on yourself enough that you start attracting opportunities to you and not necessarily going out and applying to all these 100 different job opportunities, not being qualified for them.
Yeah, and that kind of points back. I think you kind of built that in place, that mentality and that mindset in place. It sounds like through your college experience, because I'm a firm believer in nights and weekends, and a lot of people are like, "What's nights and weekends mean?" I'm like, it means that you're, rather than getting off work at 5 or 6, coming home, eating dinner, and then sitting in front of the TV watching whatever TV show happens to be trending on Netflix, for an hour or two. It is quality time, and it's time that you're spending possibly with your spouse, your significant other, with your children. But there's a big vacuum of time between the time that you're done doing everything that you need to do, including spending time with family and spending time with friends, and the time that you actually go to sleep. That a lot of people just kind of shut off their brain after dinner because they know, like, and like you said, you were spending your weekends, like 52 weekends, working on your masters, where most people probably wouldn't allocate that time because people have the the mindset already set in place that the weekends is the time to relax, it's the time to chill out, it's the time to barbecue, wash the car, walk the dog, whatever, right? But you don't ever think to take a Lego piece of learning or education or some kind of betterment for yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, to increase your capacity to do better things and bigger things. Actually, it's the same with exercise, right? You go run, you can run 4 miles a day, but and that'll make you healthy and it'll keep you in shape. But if you ever want to increase your stamina to potentially run, a half marathon, a 10K, you have to add in like sprints, and you have to add in weight training, and you have to add in things like that to be able to go beyond that plateau. Like you can get to the plateau and it's comfortable and you stay there, but then to be able to go beyond that plateau, and it just depends on your personality and what you're doing. But really that's the nights and weekends are the most important time. And especially if you just got out of the military, or especially if you're retired, like you have a huge opportunity to be able to take that time that you've spent in the military and now take a step back, but also at the same time it's really a step forward because you expanded your time frame. Like you had 168 hours when you were in the military, and you still have 168 hours every week now that you're out, but how you allocate that time. Yeah, and nights and weekends, because I mean, if you think about it, nights and weekends are probably the hardest times to actually do work, to read, to study, to learn things. And that in and of itself becomes the motivation. Like it's your proof to yourself that you're dedicating your time to something to better yourself, right?
That's right. And yeah, so I wanted to add to that, because essentially once I graduated, I started getting job opportunities. Um, I've always heard that you are the average of the five people that you surround yourself with, right? So another thing that I realized is as I got through college, I just went into a professional technical field. I started making connections with other engineers, with other professionals that were, 5, 10 years more experienced than I was, and it was like a little pocketbook of contacts that I kept in touch with. And, a lot of people, you'd be surprised how much they're willing to help. And even through my career progression, a lot of times if I had any questions about what I was doing or how to do it or encountering problems, I'll reach out to this group of people, right? Now, there wasn't any one single person that had the answer, but having a group of them provided resources, right? Where they can tell me, well, you can look here or read this book or research this topic. And they kind of provided a path for me to be able to resolve issues that I would encounter through my career, whether it was technical or whether it was, with relationships at the workplace or, maybe contracting, negotiating another job opportunity, whatever it was. But I had that group of people that I can go to. Whereas before, I think during the time I was leaving the military, I didn't have anybody to connect with, to ask questions, to be informed. So one of the other things I want to just point out is that as human beings, we have such an immense ability to be able to forecast, like look into the future and see what life is going to be like based on the decisions that we make. That there's no other species, no animal, nothing can really do what we do. We have the ability to say, if I make these decisions today and I go down this path, what's likely going to happen, right? Either, you know, I'm going to get this job opportunity, or I'm going to spend this much time, or I'm going to run out of these resources. And then what ends up happening is that as we go to others and we learn from their experiences, they can paint that picture a lot clearer. They can tell you exactly, if you go to this resource and you do this task and you kind of build up your skill sets, this is where you're going to find yourself. So now, as part of the Signal Jobs group, I'm able to provide career advice to different military service members that are transitioning out. They say, I have the opportunity to study this different technical skills or this different degree path to go into these different companies or job opportunities. What is the best approach? And a lot of times I don't tell them what to do, but I tell them, if you go down this path, this is most likely going to happen. If you go down that path, then this is most likely going to happen. So, with more information and having a clearer picture of what is to come, then ultimately you can make a better decision, right? So, from having graduated, surrounding myself with, some mentors, some people that were a little bit ahead of me, I was able to paint pictures of, okay, I'm making, 85, $90,000 right out of college, but now they're making 120, 130,000. How do I bridge that gap from here to there, right? What are some negotiating strategies? What are some of the job opportunities or skill sets that I need to learn to get to that point? And I spent a couple years just building out those skill sets that they would kind of provide guidance on and feedback on. And I suggest for anybody to do that, right? One of my biggest resources is LinkedIn. I'm connected with over 15,000 professionals in all types of careers, that deal with finances, deal with technology, deal with logistics, deal with, just anything, marketing, advertising. And if I do have questions, I can reach out to a couple of them, 4, 5, 6, 10 people and ask them the same questions. Hey, I'm going through this scenario. I thought to reach out. I see that you have experience in XYZ. Do you think you can give me some feedback? What should I do now? What should I do next? Or I'll ask, what's your experience? And based on their experience and their time, I can learn, okay, this person chose to follow this career path. This is what they like about their job. This is what they don't like about their job. This is how much they make, and I can see myself, is that something I want to do? And if it is, then I followed their footsteps because they already went through the process, right? It takes somebody, 5 to 7 years to really be able to land a good, stable career where they're experienced enough to say, I'm really fulfilled with what I'm doing, or say, no, I'm not. I kind of fell into this job and I hate it and I just wish I could do something else. So, as opposed to wasting 5 or 7 years of my life making the wrong decisions, I can look to them and say, wow, this person went through this. I can see the path, I can see the results. Let me decide if it's something that I want or don't want and save myself all the trouble and the time of making the wrong decisions at that point.
Yeah, it's really standing on the shoulders of giants, right? It's I was just thinking about that this morning. Like, if you think of the lifespan of the average fly, like household, run of the mill household fly, it's maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or something like that. And then you think of the average lifespan of a human being is, it's about 80, 90, 100, depends on how you take care of yourself. And the only thing that separates the fly from being the rulers of the universe versus the humans is the fact that the humans can look beyond today. They can look backwards to yesterday. If flies had that ability and that life cycle process of 2-3 weeks, their iterating process is much more streamlined than ours. They would probably have taken over the whole entire universe by now. It's weird to think about. Um, you mentioned mentors. It sounds like you feel they're important. What does a good mentor in your mind look like? And can you point to one specific mentor who's greatly impacted your life, good or bad?
I don't rely so much on people as individuals. I feel that I'm looking for that piece of gold, right? That hidden treasure in people's lives that I can take away from, that lesson learned and make it my own. So what I realize is, there are people that are very successful in, a specific industry, but if you look at the overall lifestyle that they have, right? How's their marriage? How's their quality time? How's their health? So I don't base success on just one single factor of like what is their paycheck, but I base it on the overall picture of their life, and then I take away the bits and pieces that I want to apply to my life, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is going to take some type of sacrifice, and it's considering, is the goal really worth the sacrifice that I'm willing to make? Like having that mindset of I'm willing to do this whatever it takes so I can get to this point where I want to be. So the bigger thing that I've kind of gone into is I love audiobooks. I've never really, although I went through school, honestly, I hated it because I felt that a lot of the things that I was learning at school were not practical that I could apply to my day to day living. But I always took away bits and pieces of very valuable information, that either made me stand out, made me more marketable, made me better prepared for future opportunities. So that's really what you kind of go into. And I just recently heard, I follow a guy named Ty Lopez. He talks about Lamborghini in the garage, but his library is worth way more than his car. And one of the things that he mentions is really understanding that you don't have to read a whole book to be able to get value out of it. If you can just get one or two lessons and one or two chapters, one or two sections out of that book to apply to your life, to be able to progress your career, to progress your relationships, to progress your happiness to the next level, that's all that matters, right? So he challenges people to read a book a week or a book a day or something like that. He doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through the whole thing. He just says look at it enough so you can get something valuable and then just move on. So I see that with other people, right? With mentors, with other professionals, other IT professionals, or anybody else. So I want to mention a few books that have really changed my perspective and my mind in order to achieve a higher level of success. The first one is called No Excuses by Brian Tracy. So this book, what I learned from the book, and there's a lot of, I mean, it's filled with a lot of gold nuggets. But if you can walk away with, two or three, for me at that point in time where I was transitioning out of the service, I started listening to the book on my runs or on my walks to the gym. While I was at the gym, I would just listen to what he was talking about. And he said, there's 1,000 different lessons to be successful, but without discipline, none of them will work. And to me, that just hit home, right? I thought, man, that is so true. There's 1,000 different ways you can achieve success, but if you don't have discipline to implement them and take action, none of them will work, right? Some people call it analysis paralysis, where you go through identifying information and you're so overwhelmed with everything that you're learning that you don't take action. And then if you don't take action, you're still stuck in the same place. So for me, action is such a big part of succeeding and growing, and taking knowledge and applying it in an effective way. That's the ultimate road path to success, right? So no excuses. If you guys get a chance to just listen to the book, again, he talks about he was a construction worker taking the bus in and out of construction work. I realized like if I'm going to change my life, it's up to me, and I need to do something different to change it. That's when he started taking action to change his life. Now, multi millionaire now. Just a great opportunity to learn from that book. No excuses. So the power of discipline was, the lesson that I learned from that. The other one was the 5 a.m. club. There's other different lessons to kind of take away from this book, but knowing that you have resources, right? And one of the biggest resources that we have is time. And we were just talking about that, right? Why would we continue to wake up at 5 a.m., although there's no requirements or there's nobody yelling at us to get out of bed, to be somewhere on time? There's no penalty for waking up at 6 or 7 or 8. Um, but because I realized that time is the biggest resource that I have that's limited, because I can always go out and learn new lessons. I can always go out and make more money. I can always gain a lot of these things back. I can always build relationships. But the time that I have, once it's gone, I can never get it back. So the way that we spent time, you just mentioned, whether you come home and you sit on the couch watching TV 4 or 5 hours, I think it's the average throughout the United States where people watch TV every day on a daily basis. It's like that's a valuable time that you're wasting away that you're never going to get back. You're never going to have time to look back and say, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, but then you don't. I wish I would have spent more time growing my skills, but then you don't. So I talk to people and I tell them, you should pursue getting a certification or training or a degree. And they say, well, it takes too long. They don't realize the time's going to pass anyway. So a year from now, you're going to look back and you're going to say, I dedicated myself having discipline to spend the time doing something that's going to affect the rest of my career. or the rest of my life or the rest of my marriage? Or am I just going to wait around, keep doing what I'm doing, and a year later regret that I didn't do anything, right? So it's the pain of the effort and the time, the sacrifice, or the pain of regret. Now, I was speaking to my wife about this, and it's super, super important to understand that there's two types of happiness. There's the type of happiness where you experience in the moment. Let's say you go on vacation and you have a great time, and it's just an amazing experience. But after the vacation, you remember that time and you're like, man, it was a great time. But you're not going to feel the same excitement that you did when you were there, right? When you were living it out in person. So the sense of happiness that you have is where you're experiencing happiness, but then there's another type of happiness that comes from memory, right? Again, the level of memory happiness that we have about the things that we've been through, let's say going to college. For me, it was not a pleasant experience. It was difficult. I went through the discipline, but now I look back and I'm like, man, I'm so happy that I went through it because now I reap the rewards and now I get to experience a better quality of life. So the memory of going through those stages, right? The memory of going through boot camp, going through training, going through the military, like I'm super grateful and joyful that I went through that because it made me a better person at the end. So the memory becomes a sense of joy and happiness that I can grantly just receive more fulfillment in my current level and in my current time. So the 5 a.m. club, it really highlights a lot of this. It's learning how to use resources efficiently in a story form. Another one is the happiness advantage, right? So this book by Shawn Achor, I was at a stage in my life where, again, going through school, going through fighting to get different job opportunities to grow my career, I wanted to have any edge on how can I market myself better? How can I be more of the valuable individual that companies are going to want? The happiness advantage is filled with key lessons that you can implement on how you can be more efficient and more effective in anything that you do, right? So they tested out, for example, there was research done with doctors that doctors, same career path, same degree, same education, same training, when they were primed with a thank you note or a lollipop or some kind of gift before they would go into see a client or somebody that was sick, they performed, I believe it was something like 80% higher and more precise conclusion about what the person had and what they were going through and what was required to help them feel better than somebody that was a neutral or negative state. So what that meant is that if the same doctor with the same skills, with the same knowledge, would go to see a patient and it would go through all the list of the symptoms, if they were in a negative or normal neutral state, I believe it was either 40 or 50% of the time were less effective in treating them the right way than if they were primed with an initial thought of happiness or gratitude that they went into that, right? So what ends up happening is with stress and with any challenges, we tend to go into this fight or flight response that it hinders our ability to see opportunity, right? Like our instinct kicks in and we are not using the full mental capacity that we would. Our full brain is not activated in resolving problems because of how we're primed before we go into any situation. So one of the things I learned about that book is, for example, a sense of control has huge amounts of effect based on how we're primed to feel happy at the moment and how we're going to perform for the future. So what happens is if you're focused and you think about things that are out of your control, oh my gosh, the weather sucks. Oh my gosh, my boss is horrible. Oh my gosh, like there's so many different things that are affecting my life and there's nothing I can do to change it. Right away, instantly, your mood, your state, your mental capacity goes down and you're not going to be able to perform to a higher level. But if you go into this job and you say, you know what, although it may be raining today, although my boss says this, what I can do is, I'll make sure to do things efficiently so that I can either get that person off my back or that I can do something indoors for today, and whatever I was going to do outdoors, I can leave it up for tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a different day, an opportunity. So then I can, kind of procrastinate on purpose So it'll take advantage to myself. And my response is what is in my control? What's in my control is how I use my time. What's in my control is how I use my resources. What's in my control is how can I prepare better to deal with stress and difficult situations. Again, taking responsibility for myself and the outcome of what I'm going through is the best way that we can overcome and become successful in the long term. So, in addition to the 5 a.m. club, the 10x rule by Grant Cardone. He's super multimillionaire, owns real estate all over the U.S. and his key lesson in the book is about having major action. You realize that anything that you want to achieve, let's say you want to lose weight, and you think, oh, I need to work out for 2-3 weeks to lose 2 pounds. He says, okay, well, don't just do it for 2-3 weeks. Think about 10 times that effort, right? Instead of working out, 1 hour a week, you work out 2 hours a week. Instead of 3 weeks, you're going to be, 30 weeks. You're going to spend 6 months putting the effort into optimizing your body to lose weight, and it almost guarantees that you're going to be successful. Why? Because you're so committed to overachieving in this goal that there's no way for you to fail, right? So when it comes to, I want to learn a new skill, well, don't just learn one skill, learn 10 different skills on how you're going to succeed in this particular goal that you have. So, with the 5 a.m. club being, how you leverage those resources, and you tie it to the 10x principle of how much effort you're going to put into implementing these new resources, right? I'm not just going to call one client, I'm going to call 10 clients. I'm not just going to have one guest, I'm going to have 10 guests, right? So out of those 10 guests, the probabilities that you're going to have one great show are exponentially growing, over time for you to be successful. So, the 10X rule by Grant Cardone, Limitless by Jim Kwik, it's all about the mindset, right? Limitless deals with understanding that we all have limited beliefs that we've grown up over time. And a lot of what hinders us to be able to succeed is we're stuck in this pattern where, we were raised and we pick up this life lessons, these values that we hold on to without really seeing if those values are worth keeping within my character. So, for example, I grew up in a single mom household that always talked about life is not fair, right? So if you pick up that lesson and that valuable trait for your character, everything that you see in life, it's like, well, life is not fair. So no matter how much I work, life is not fair. I'm always going to get the least amount of results or the least amount of success, or, people are going to take advantage because life is not fair, right? So that limited belief is going to prevent me from taking action. That limited belief is going to be the obstacle that I need to overcome. So before I implement anything, I need to realize, okay, these limiting beliefs I need to get rid of that are going to limit my ability to perform. So I need to have, I guess some people would say, the power of positive thinking. If you ever hear, and I haven't read any books by Zig Ziggler, but if you hear any videos on YouTube, just super great lessons about understanding that we have an immense capability to decide our life in a positive or negative way. Every day we're making decisions, so those decisions are going to project us towards success or lead us towards failure in life. And what ends up happening is if we don't have a positive mindset, then our hope is going to be limited. And that hope is what gives us the motivation to move forward. So, again, understanding our ability to see and foreshadow what's going to happen in the future, if you have a positive outlook and you know that there's a high likelihood that you're going to succeed and you're going to reach your goals, whether it's finishing a degree, whether it's meeting somebody that you want to marry, whether it's making $100,000, whether it's making $1 million, right? You have to have the hope that you're going to be able to achieve it, and then back up that hope and that goal with immense action, massive action. You're going to continue, and your chances to succeeding are going to be, exponentially greater, as opposed to taking life on, always doubting, but I just don't know how to do it, but I just don't know anyone that can help me, but, always looking at the negative side, where again, just like the doctors, if they're coming in there with a negative mindset or even a neutral mindset, they're already outnumbered in the level of success they're going to achieve because of that state of mind and because of those things. So Limitless, it implements a lot of different strategies. how you can overcome those mental limitations that you impose on yourself and that are going to hold you back from achieving success over the long term. And then just the last, but most importantly, I really want to share this because it's very important to me. I read the Bible every day, throughout the week. And the thing about it is that regardless of how much success we can gain in the world, our character and our life, it's based on how we see ourselves in the long term, right? The Bible teaches us that God made us with a purpose and a talent and an ability to be able to live life to the full, and understanding that we were made with a purpose. Again, understanding that for the hope for the future, for me, that strictly comes from the Bible. Understand that Jesus, the sacrifice that he made to love people, to serve people, right? And what happens is confidence comes from understanding that the person you want to be and the person that you are, it's congruent. You see yourself as somebody that has values, somebody that has the willingness to serve and to love others, that has the capacity to do more, not for myself and in a selfish way, but in a selfless way, that we can be able to be fulfilled because we desire to grow so that we can serve others, right? So from the Bible, I mean, it's impacted my life from an early stage where I realized I don't want to do these things for myself. I want to do these things for others, for the people that I love. I want to do it for my family. I want to do it for the service members that don't have hope or an idea of how to succeed in life. So I want to help them. And in order to do that, I use the abilities, the mindset, the talents, whatever God has provided me, and the understanding that He has a plan for my life. And when I believe that, then I want to pursue that plan, right? Jeremiah 29 says, "For I have plans for your future, for hope, not to harm you, but you'll find me and seek me when you seek me with all your heart," right? So it's like God giving us this promise of, I have a plan for your life, and the plan is not to hurt you or for you to feel hurt, but the plan is to make you better, right? Is to give you hope and a future so you have something to look forward to. And unfortunately, I do come across a lot of military service members that they have survival guilt, right? They went off to war, they experienced war, they had friends that died, they have broken relationships, they've gone through divorce, and there's this mental psychological process that's called learned hopelessness. So learned hopelessness comes from feeling defeat over and over multiple times throughout your lifetime, where now you don't see a path or a way forward because there's no sense of hope, right? Hopelessness is, when you're trying to do something different, but you don't see how you can become successful, how you can get out of that painful state. But what ends up happening is that the only way we can get out of that is by being able to focus. Maybe that you don't have the courage or you don't have the hope for yourself, but when somebody else has hope for you, you're borrowing that hope. The same way that I borrowed my mentors or my um, colleagues' experience and their lessons and their ability to move forward. And I said, man, I'm not motivated today, but I can borrow somebody else's hope. So I go to the Bible and I fill myself with the hope that God has for me, so that I can then use that hope to start to implement it. And I say, maybe I don't believe I can do this, but if my wife or my children or my colleagues thinks I can, at least I'm going to try it, right? At least I'm going to take action and take those steps forward to be able to move out of that comfort zone. And even when I was going through different career changes in my career, different contracts, um, I would listen to Eric Thomas. So Eric Thomas, he doesn't necessarily have a book, but he does tons and tons of videos on YouTube about motivation. He's all about motivation, about discipline and training and working in the dark so that you can be successful in the light. Right? He talks about waking up early and putting in the grind and the grind and the grind, and I love a lot of his messages because it instills the sense of discipline and success, that comes from pain. Because not only can you drive, motivation from wanting to succeed at something, but also from the pain that you have of not succeeding. So when I initially decided to go to school, I felt the sense of pain of I'm not getting any calls back. I'm not getting interviews. I have a family to support. I felt the pain of not being able to provide for my children the things that they wanted. I felt the pain of not being able to take my wife to dinner and afford to buy her nice things. I felt the pain of not being good enough. And that motivation, that pain was the motivation I used to say, the pain of not being good enough for my family or being able to provide is greater than anything I'm going to face while going to school and getting a degree and getting a certification or training to be healthier or, and at that point, I use that pain as leverage to motivate myself to take action and move forward. So again, I just want to say that, understanding the hope that we get from reading the Bible and the pain from understanding that we are not living up to our full potential can really push us to take action to change.
Are there any other Bible verses that maybe one or two that you have highlighted that you really lean on when you need some motivation or some guidance?
One of the ones that really stands out to me, because I believe there's a lot of misconception about what people read or they see in the Bible. Um, and then one of the things that I've learned, there's a verse called First Thessalonians 5:16, and it says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ." Right, and a lot of people have the misconception, right? The limited belief that God is this unfair God, right? That He makes us struggle or that He puts circumstances to cause us to pain and hurt. But He says, no, God's will is for us to rejoice, to have this life to the full, to experience life in so many great, beautiful facets, right? That He gives us everything in nature with this perfect balance. Like, why doesn't the ocean overcome into the land and just wipe away everyone and all the cities and all these things? Because everything has its limited order, right? Everything's in order and perfect balance. Why doesn't the Earth go out of its orbit or spin in a way that would limit our seasons, that would cause chaos with heat or freezing points? And it's because it's in perfect balance. There's all these perfect balances taking place now. He made all these things to kind of work together, so that there is a sort of like a testimony to this perfect balance that's in the world, right? We don't just find, for example, if you find a watch in the ground somewhere, if you go to a park, you go to a store, you don't just pick up a watch and say, oh my gosh, this suddenly happened. It just appeared in a perfect form where it's running in perfect synchronization with time, and like it has perfect straps that I can wrap around my wrist, and it has all these things. There had to be somebody that created it, and it had to be created in a perfect way so that it could do its function, right? So this watch was created by something, by a creator. And then when we look at life, there is a great, great purpose that God has for each and every one of us. But the thing is that we don't acknowledge it because we have misconceptions about life and misconceptions about God and about ourselves. The ability and the times that we've been given, the opportunity and the resources for us to use, to be able to set the example that Jesus set for us, right? Jesus said, "For there is no greater friend that lays down his life for others." Right? If he's talking about love, how much are we willing to sacrifice for others? And that's what Jesus did on the cross. He sacrificed his life for us to live a life to the full, for us to have a relationship with God. But if we don't see it the right way, then we're never going to understand our full potential and our full purpose and the life of fulfillment. So I kind of relate that to glasses, right? If I'm walking around with broken glasses or tainted glasses, everything's going to look dark, everything's going to look distorted. And that's when we walk around life with a distortion that comes from our mindset, right? Or all the times that we've been broken or hurt in the past, or things that we picked up from our parents, things that we picked up from previous relationships, of pain that was brought on, not because of our doing, but from other people's mistakes, right? Because those people were walking around with broken, limited beliefs and painful experiences. So those painful experiences that they had translate to the painful experiences that we have, that translate to painful experiences that we provide for others. Ultimately in life, as much as people think we're not connected, we are all connected. If you look at how cells are kind of put together, or atoms, and then you look at how constellations are brought together, like it's such a similar um, format. Like if you actually put the pictures side by side of how like nucleus and molecules, and you look at a molecule and how it has atoms that go around the nucleus, is the same way that the earth goes around the sun. Why is it such a same similar pattern from one thing to another unless it was created with some sort of purpose where it all relates to each other. So we affect others, others affect us. And the only way we can break out of that is by not continuing that domino effect of pain and suffering, but being able to change by understanding the truth. So the last verse I want to share, um, John 8:31 and 32, it says, to the Jews that have believed in him, Jesus says, if you hold on to my teachings, you're really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. There is no way that we can achieve a sense of freedom if we don't understand the truth about who we are, the truth about who God is, the truth about why we're here in this world, why we were created. And once we do that, we pursue understanding that truth, then we can have clarity, which is what's going to help us to be able to step forward and make the right decisions to have a relationship with God, have a relationship with others, to have a sense of fulfillment, to have a sense of joy, to understand God's plan. And again, not to be filled with pain and suffering, but to move on to a greater level in our life overall.
Yeah, you definitely pointed that out. The learned helplessness and the the things that you gather growing up in your childhood that set your values in place, and then whether you question those values or not. I mean, at the end of the day, like the person that says I'm going to be successful and the same person that says I'm not going to be successful, well, both of those answers are right, right? It just comes back to the mindset you have, the values you have in place, your ability to look at the truth subjectively and understand it and break it down in the grander scheme of things and how it impacts not just you but the greater whole around you. So yeah, that was a deep dive. Thank you. No, but I appreciate it. I was actually going to ask you about some books, but that has definitely checked that box for me today. um, so let me just actually shift a little bit from that because it pertains a little bit to what you were saying. One of the biggest, or if you've had a huge failure moment in your life after leaving the military, what process, how did you process that stumbling point? And could you give some context of a time and place? Like, was it a misstep of a market crash? Was it a shift in the job market? Was it personal tragedy or anything else like that? Uh, Anyone that you could particularly point to that was a failure point, and then maybe also what did you learn from that failure in hindsight?
Yeah, John, honestly, it's really hard to pinpoint out one of the failures. Some people say that, somebody that succeeds is the person that fails 10 times and gets up 11 times and keeps trying, right? I've had failures financially, I have failures with education, certifications, training. I've had failures in what I see as things that are done in my marriage that I'm not proud of. But at each and every point in time, I didn't give up. I can honestly say, at one point in time, I'll start just with the financial things that I had saved. I think it was close to $40,000, $50,000 in a retirement account, and I thought to myself, well, I'm pretty sure I could double this amount of money if I just start doing my own stock trading and doing, options trading and, doing all these things that I had some knowledge of, but I didn't have the full scope of understanding that maybe somebody that had been doing it 10, 12, 15 years, 20 years would have in the market, right? So it became, just more of like an emotional trade where everything was like ups and downs. My mood changed, my mental state changed. So right away, I just started taking losses, losses, losses. And at that point, like you're so committed to this one thing that you're not willing to cut your losses and move on, that you kind of stay with it regardless of how much you're losing at the time. So, I lost tens of thousands of dollars through that. What I learned is that there's a sense of risk with everything that we do, right? And evaluating how can we limit the exposure to risk to having that loss, even though the result may not be as high, it's much much better than taking a loss at any point in time. So if you've been a financial person, or if you ever follow stocks or investments, Warren Buffett, he has one rule, and it says, "Don't lose your money." As simple as that may be, and as you go deeper into that lesson, you understand why would he say that. It's because, for example, if you spend $100,000 in Coca-Cola, or whatever company, Apple, that you're purchasing, and all of a sudden you take a 50% loss, that means that now you have $50,000. So at $50,000, you know you're gonna, let's say the stock takes 2 3 years to gain 50% back, right? So the ratio is the same, that you lost 50% and you gained 50%, but 50% of 100 is 50,000. 50% of 50 is 25,000. So even though it's taking longer to gain the same amount of percentage, now you're still only at half of what you were from your initial loss. Now it's going to take another 3 4 years for you to be able to gain another 50%. So in order to really make back what you lost, just to break even, it's going to take you exponentially longer, and now you're going to have to multiply those investments so you can gain 100% of the time, so you can make up for 50% of the loss, right? That's a huge ratio of loss to profit over time. So now I see certain things, and I realize that I rather and would have done much much better limiting my risk and having a slower growth over time than taking that loss and now taking years and years just to be able to make it up to be back to where it was. So that comes with opportunity cost. That comes with understanding risk, and anything that we do. Just like I mentioned, there's everything that we do in career wise, in relationships. There's a sense of supply and demand. There's a sense of risk that comes with certain actions. Not to say that we shouldn't. We should always take action, but understanding that the more knowledge we have and the better prepared we are, then the more we're going to mitigate that risk in anything that we do.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what you're referring to, like minimizing the downside and maximizing the upside, I think a lot of people, where they get that wrong is they don't, and this isn't financial advice, so do your own research, internet. But a lot of people get that wrong, is they look at the upside and they see the allure of the upside, and they don't take the same amount of diligence to look at the downside and understand what the downside actually is, right? You got to do like an 80-20 kind of Pareto analysis of it to see how much am I potentially going to earn versus how much will I potentially lose. And you have to really balance that out so that you can potentially win on the end. And of course, you never know. Markets do what markets do. So
Yeah, yeah. So that was definitely a mistake from um, with finances. I've made mistakes, just relationships, right? My wife and I, we've been married for over 10 years, and we've gone through a lot of ups and downs. There's things that I'm not proud of, but I realize that understanding how to learn from those lessons, right? In my marriage, I really recommend the five love languages to any couple, to anybody overall, even if it's just professional relationships, because I understand that we're so different in character that what might be important to one person is not important to the next, right? So for me, if I'm the type of person that likes to have physical touch, that likes to spend time to hold hands, to feel hugs, things like that, those things fulfill me, right? I feel content with that. But if to my wife, if her love language is more about sacrifice and acts of service, I can sit down and just hug her all day and I'm fully content. And she's like, but you're not helping me with anything. I still got to do chores. I still got to clean the house. I still got to take care of the kids. I still got to, do laundry, do this, and that. So she's not going to feel content, and she's not going to feel all the love just by me sitting down and hugging her. So understanding from different perspectives and different characters and relationships, and that is such a big part of any relationship, right? And even if you just happen to have a roommate, well, hey, what does it mean to you for me to be a good roommate? Oh, well, it means that you're going to clean half the time, the bathroom, or, maybe you can share, some food, or we can share expenses, or, where as to somebody else, it could be, well, as long as you take care of your stuff and I take care of mine, that's perfectly fine, right? But what happens is that if there's no communication on what those unspoken expectations are, that person is expecting you to share, and then they're expecting you to take care of your own stuff. It's not gonna that relationship or that communication is not gonna work, because now the person that is expecting you to share is gonna feel upset because you're not sharing, right? And the other person that's like, why is he always asking me for things when he should be taking care of his own stuff? He's not. Then I'm gonna feel like he's always freeloading, or he's always, But again, it's having a mutual understanding, where it could be a simple conversation. It could be very easy. If my wife says, "Hey, can you do laundry once a week?" and that would be a huge help for me. I'm like, oh snap, now I get it. She wants me to do laundry, and now she feels that I care for her. She feels that she's being loved. She feels that she's being considered, as opposed to thinking that, well, my husband just sits around, wants to spend time with me on the couch, but he's not really helping me. He doesn't consider my needs. He doesn't consider my things. So, five love languages is a great opportunity to consider others, to consider ourselves, and why we may sometimes not feel appreciated or loved, and when we're not, then we can communicate that to others. Hey, I think I would feel better if you can communicate with me, or you can do this for me. Maybe you can help me. Um, One of the things that we do, me and my wife, is we have a tour business on the side, right? So initially, I started out renting vehicles. We rented a truck, 2020 Dodge Ram. Then we went out, we bought a Mercedes Benz, then we bought a BMW, then we bought another Dodge Ram. And, we have five, six cars that we're constantly renting out. Because I already have a business, I have signal jobs, I have a lot of things that I do on a day to day basis. I felt overwhelmed because it was my responsibility to take care of the business and the cars and the vehicles. And because she saw that I was doing it, she never felt the need to ask if I needed help, right? But because of that, I was constantly stressed about the timelines, the amount of effort it took, the responsibility. And after about a month and a half to 2 months of me being on edge, she said, "Hey, why are you so like upset all the time? You're always kind of like rushing in and out, and you're busy, and you're not happy with where we are right now." And I said, "Well, it's because I have a lot of stress and pressure from the responsibility to deliver the vehicles, have them clean. I'm doing my day to day job. I'm doing all these other things." So then what ended up happening was, like, she became aware of what my needs were. And she said, "Well, let me take care of those things for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And you can continue with your day to day job, and maintaining, signal jobs and other things I'm working on." Right. But it was through the communication of expectations and understanding what is it that I need that was able to help a relationship overall continue to get better. Right. So now, we're helping each other. Now she feels that sense of, the same way that to her acts of service is a way that I can show her love. That's the way that she feels that she's showing me love by helping me with things that I need.
Yeah, delivering your expectations and also setting your own expectations is huge, huge, huge thing when it comes to building relationships, whether it's spousal relationships, friendships, business relationships. It's all the same. They're all relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, and it relates to a professional career as well. There's so many times that I hear people say, "Man, I've been grinding it out at this job for 3 years, 5 years, and I'm not getting a promotion. I'm not getting ahead." But they never have that conversation with the hiring manager. Just saying, I would like to get promoted. I would like to get a raise. What do I need to do to get there? Have a sense of clarity, right? Of what the expectations are from the hiring manager. If they say, well, you spend a lot of time on these tasks, but they're not as valuable as if you're doing X, Y, Z, right? Now that you have a clear understanding of what you need to do to improve, to be more effective and efficient in providing value to the organization based on the feedback from the hiring manager, from the team lead, from the people who are the decision makers, then at that point you can move on to the next level by communicating clearly.
Absolutely. Let me shift gears a little bit and let me ask you a hypothetical question. if you could potentially go back and have a meeting with your 16-year-old self, um, just about life in general, what would that conversation look like? And could you give me like a time and a place, a context of where you would be actually meeting up with your 16-year-old self?
Yeah, so I have an interesting story. I left my house when I was 15. Right, I kind of grew up with a single mom. She had to have two, three jobs just to support me and my brothers. But I realized that because of that, she was moving around a lot, changing jobs, trying to provide for us, and I didn't have a sense of stability. So once I got my first job, I was working at similar to a CVS back then. It was called Achor, a 24-hour pharmacy. I worked in the photo department, using the pictures, printing them out, running the cashier. So anyway, I moved in. I rented a room with a friend of mine. We kind of just split the bills, and I realized a lot of what I was trying to figure out was things on my own. How can I do what I need to do and make a lot of the mistakes in the process because I thought I knew what was best. And I think a lot of young people do this. They always think they know everything. I have a 15-year-old son, teenager. I'm like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Let's work on getting your license. Let's work on, teaching you about finances. Oh, I got it, I got it. And he ends up losing money. He ends up wasting time. He ends up, just making mistakes. And it's like, I could have told you that, right? you didn't learn the lessons from the advice that's given to you. A lot of it has to do with pride. I realized that I was very prideful during that time. Some of it has to do with not having a sense of trust in others that, they really know what they're talking about. Because, again, if you make a decision, you make a mistake, you can take responsibility for yourself. But if you're only pursuing things that other people tell you, you may not feel that it's your responsibility, right? So I think always understanding that everything you do, good or bad, and the consequence that comes from it is your responsibility and only on you, then you can be accountable to yourself. But at the same time, learning to take the lessons learned from others, right? To be able to help you to achieve much more. And there's a saying out there that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. You need to have a team of people around you. I have somebody that I go to for financial advice. I have, just all the books that I go through for different lessons of how I can succeed, how I can improve my mindset, my mental stability, my emotional stability, my sense of happiness, my relationship with my wife. Mentors, guides, and people that have been there and done that are super, super important. And understanding how valuable those relationships are. There was a relationship, honestly, that I lost because I didn't have the emotional stability where there was an executive that I met during one of my first jobs that I did. I was just starting out as an engineer, and we built a pretty good rapport relationship. He would stop by, hey, how's it going? How can I help you? How can you, be more efficient in what you're doing? How can I help you develop your skills? Um, so he was sort of like a mentor, and because it was a contract job, when it came time to finish that work, I was thinking like, what do I do? Right? I don't have another job lined up. I was really stressing. So I started calling him. He had given me his personal number, and I just started calling him, leaving him messages. Hey, I really need to talk to you. I don't know what to do. This, and that. And he was away on a trip. But then what ended up happening was throughout the following days, I talked to different people. I sought out some different resources. I kind of figured out what my next steps would be, and I felt like I was in a much better place. But by the time he called me back, I was just kind of joking around the whole situation, and he's like, "Hey, I know that we have a professional relationship, but you're kind of blowing up my phone, and you didn't seem like everything was good. Like there's something wrong with you." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out, whatever." But to his perspective, I really wasn't very stable emotionally to kind of have a proper good relationship with. like at a friend type of level, you know. So, shortly after that, he kind of just ghosted me. He kind of blew me off. He stopped answering any of my messages, any of the calls that I would send him. And I realized, right? I realized exactly where I was at that point and why he felt the way that he did, as to, maybe I need to keep my distance from this person because they're not somebody that's stable and trustworthy enough to kind of maintain their barrier. Um, so, maybe that's one of the mistakes that I learned from. But as a 16-year-old, young man, I would say, it's super important to understand how valuable relationships are, specifically with people that can really help you to get ahead, right? The people that are succeeding in their life, in their career, that have been there, done that. Um, One of the biggest lessons I've learned also from Ray Dalio. If you guys ever search for him, just like Warren Buffett, he manages hedge funds with billions and billions and billions of dollars. And one of the greatest lessons that he's taught over his videos is understanding that it's not what you know that gets you in trouble. It's the things that you don't realize that you don't know, right? And he compares it to life is like walking through a jungle that's filled with, danger, at all kinds of stages and steps of that jungle. But it's only the people that have been there that can tell you, hey, there's some quicksand there. Hey, there's this animal that's in this area. There's something that can really put your life in danger, right? Don't touch these plants. Don't do these things. But when you're walking through a jungle and you don't know what the plants are, what the animals are, where the danger is, you don't know any of these things, then you're looking to end up getting hurt, right? Just like the risk part of it. So I think it's super super valuable to understand that. Ask yourself, what is it that I don't know about this career? What is it that I don't know about going into this relationship that can cause me to fail or cause me to hurt and pain and struggle and lose, financially, or lose things that are valuable to you, that could really make all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, just recently over the summer started doing free diving. Did it for a few months, and that was one of the thoughts that was primarily in my head every time I went in the water. I mean, I'm out in the ocean. I never spent a whole lot of time in the ocean, but um, once you get out to a certain point in the ocean, maybe 100 meters or 200 meters out from the shoreline, and you're under the water, or at least looking under the water, you realize like there's a whole lot of space below you, and on top of that there's thousands of creatures in that water that you just, a, you may not know what they are, b, you may not know how dangerous they are or if they're dangerous, and then c, like how to respond or react to them. So it was a real steep learning curve for me, but I actually had a couple people that I reached out to that were there, and I just basically, instead of peppering them with questions and bugging them to death, I really just, because they would go out as well, and I would just go out with them, and I would literally just follow them around and watch what they do and observe and see how they're navigating things. What do they look for? What are their reactions to different species of plants and animals that are in the water and on the floor of the sea there. And yeah, you really, and again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, like understanding the risk and how heavy the risk is versus potential how good the potential upside is going to be, right? So doing that analysis, it works out in many, many, many different ways to be able to do that risk analysis and understand what are the risks. Am I willing to accept these risks? Just like a commander does in the military, right? They have to do risk assessments, and they decide how much risk am I determined to accept? And am I going to do the circle X on the vehicle that says that vehicle will go out into the convoy to go across the berm to do whatever mission, right? Same situations.
Yeah, yeah, and then honestly, that's such an important mindset, specifically transitioning out of the service. When somebody may consider what kind of degree should I go into, what should I study, what field to go into. I've had people that they'll just get kind of like a random degree because they thought it was going to be helpful, right? And let's say you get a degree in homeland security, but all of a sudden you want to go into the IT industry, and the degree is worthless, right? So now, whether they did the GI Bill or whether they might have taken out student loans or whatever it was, is the degree going to be worth the career, right? Are you going to get your money's worth through your lifetime with that education and the time that you spend on it? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not, right? But it's not until you really talk to somebody and get them to explain to you what the process is, what the risk reward ratio is, and what the long term payoff. Then that's when it comes to really consider what the right decision would be at that point.
Yeah, and I will just tack on one more thing onto that as far as reaching out and getting advice from people. You also have to take the responsibility to understand that whatever advice is given to you, you have to take it in the context of your own life, because that advice doesn't necessarily apply verbatim from one person to another. Like, for example, you know, uh, Ray Dalio or even Warren Buffett, like, how do you become a millionaire? How do you become a billionaire? Like, you can follow their methods, but if you don't follow them in a way that's true to who you are as a person and that matches with your personality and your values, then you'll not get the same outcomes, right? Never. So, what are your thoughts on personal brand, and how important do you feel it is to being successful in the next decade? And how have you gone about building your personal brand?
So, this is a more recent topic. It's come out in the media, so many different platforms. There's, you know, professional connections on LinkedIn. There's Twitter. There's, YouTube. There's Snapchat, TikTok. Um, First of all, understanding that your personal brand, it's a huge impact that can ultimately open up doors that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And it goes back to building those relationships, right? Because there's a saying that says it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And then when it comes to achieving at the top of any industry, it's not about who you know, but it's about who knows you. So they have to know who you are. They have to know what you're looking for. They have to know what you're capable of doing, so that when it comes time for an organization to say, we need a project manager, and right away it's like, oh, I know a project manager. I know that this person is always posting about, the projects that he's worked on. He's posting about how he was efficient in the budgets and the timeline, and he was able to achieve certain level of performance, and all these different things. Same thing with technical skills, right? If you're learning technical skills, whether you're just learning them now or you've been doing it for 5, 10 years, if nobody knows that you know how to program and build and design a whole network for an enterprise company, or how to secure, organizational data or work on the cloud technologies, then they're not going to come to you to offer you that opportunity, right? So what ended up happening, and this is a strategy that I kind of developed initially because I was trying to build my network, but I didn't realize that I was building a brand until after the fact. So I started to connect with a lot of recruiters and contract managers, like IT managers, in different contracting companies. And I would literally spend 20, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, connecting with people. And I would send them messages. Hi, I'm a transition service member. I'm looking to get into this industry. Just want to just introduce myself. And back then, I think initially LinkedIn didn't have a limit of how many messages you can send out. I think now they limit to 100 per week. So I send out about 100 per week, right? So people ask me, how do you know 17,000 people in your network? And I'm like, well, because I built that network connection over time, and I built a brand unconsciously doing that, right? I just knew that they had the opportunities, and I had to get my name out there so that I could find out what those opportunities were, and just building those connections, those relationships. Now, honestly, I've been in like 4 or 5 different podcasts because I talk to people about transitioning service, about the military, about success, about business, and people come to me all the time. I get job opportunities out of the blue because people know who I am, and I may not necessarily be looking for any, but it's an opportunity for us to connect and to grow. And I might be able to refer somebody that I know, right? So it may not necessarily be that, I'm looking for something, but because somebody else established a relationship with me, now I can help them to find opportunities that I'm provided, right? Opportunities that come to me, I can say, hey, well, I'm not working on IT at this moment, but I do know a great engineer. I know a transition service member. They're certified. They do this, they do that. Um, so building a brand is super, super important. Again, I tell all the transition service members at a minimum, you should have a professional LinkedIn profile and connect between 100. Well, honestly, I would say just max out all your connection requests with as many IT professionals as you can. If you're looking to get into IT, if you're looking to get into marketing, then look for marketing managers, marketing directors. Look for marketing companies. If you're looking to get into any type of business, then look for those individuals that are doing what you want to do. Connect with them. Definitely seek out some advice, but then continue to build your name and your brand over time. Our Signal Jobs group has over close to 18,000 service members that have transitioning or are transitioning out, and they work in all different industries where it comes to IT, when it comes to school, working in colleges, working in hospitals, working in banks, working in technical companies, working in contract companies with the government or companies overseas. So there's so many different opportunities out there, but unless you're getting your name out there, you're connecting with people, you're not going to find them. And that was my obstacle to overcome when I transitioned out. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a brand. Um, but as now I see that people are more aware of what it takes to find those opportunities and those connections, leverage again, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you have more time to do other social websites and Twitter or even Facebook. I know that Facebook, a lot of people see it as a professional platform, but for small businesses, that's one of the biggest source of finding leads and being able to promote yourself, being able to promote your skill, whether you're a realtor or you service, just different areas in any capacity. You own a mechanic shop, you could target people within your geographical area within a 20-mile radius, within a 50-mile radius, and all of a sudden everybody in that city or that town knows where your shop is, knows what you do, and I'm pretty sure if they need your service, they're going to reach out to you.
Yeah, it's great advice. I can't stress it enough that it's not even so much like I'm John McConnell and here's my John McConnell t-shirt. It's not really that. It's more about building how you want the world to see you, right? In what light you want the world to see you, and what values and what morals and what uh, value you can actually bring to somebody else in a company, in a business, as a business partner, as an individual entrepreneur. Um, do you, do you have like a certain number of posts that you make to say LinkedIn or Facebook every day?
So typically I try to post a minimum 3 times a week because I have so many different projects going on. But one thing that I've been doing recently, and again, it all goes back to your network, right? Is I have a colleague that has a military nonprofit. I got your says he helps military guys more with the quality of life, with experiences and really sometimes even overcoming PTSD and things like that. Like he's connected to doctors, psychologists, to different people. So what I do is that I will have a post regarding, hey, this is a great organization that is doing great things for military service members. Let me connect you guys, my group or my followers, to him. And then he'll do the same thing vice versa. Anybody that he knows that he's connected with, he's worked with, hey, if you guys are looking for IT services, connect with Andres. Look for Signal Jobs. Join their page, join their group. So that way Again, he already has a massive followings. I have my massive followings. The growth is exponential as opposed to having individual reach outs where it's like talking to one person at a time. So leveraging your network and leveraging their network. One of the things that I teach, again, trust issues service members and my Signal Jobs group is if you're applying to jobs the way that I did initially, it took me days and days to fill out 50 to 100 applications, right? Like each one takes between minimum 15 to 30 minutes per application. If I was applying all day long, I was maybe filling out 10 to 20 applications a day, 5 days a week, trying to get a job. I couldn't find a job. So my time was very limited. As I gained the skill of networking with others, I started connecting with recruiters. So I looked up the top 5 contracting companies, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, L3, Harris, just so many different General Dynamics, so many different companies out there that are doing contract work. And I started connecting with their recruiters, right? So let's say instead of applying to 100 different jobs, that's 100 different jobs. If I connect to 100 different recruiters, these recruiters have access to dozens of opportunities, right? So let's say if each recruiter has maybe 10 different jobs, I only need to contact 10 recruiters and I would have got access to 100 jobs. You see the power of leverage of networking? It's huge, it's immense because it exponentially grows anything that you're trying to achieve. So then what ends up happening is that I would tell the guys, don't go and apply to these jobs online because most of the time you're not even going to get a call back. Go and connect with the recruiters, tell them who you are, what you're doing, and what you're looking for. And now those recruiters are out there helping to find you a job. So one recruiter is going to connect me with 10 hiring managers. Another one is going to connect me with another 10 hiring managers. If I'm connecting with 20, 30 recruiters a week, now I'm getting exposed to hundreds of different job opportunities, right? Where I wouldn't have otherwise had been able to take the time to apply to 300, 400 different jobs in 1 week, right? So now you're achieving more by doing less because you're working with a team. So super, super important to build a brand, to build those connections. And again, it's not until you learn these skills that you're able to work exponentially better and more efficiently than if you're trying to grind it out. As I said, you can't grind it out at your job. You have to grind it out in yourself to grow your skills and abilities so you can perform at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing I'm hoping to expand the knowledge on a little bit as well. Is, I mean, the key audience here is, people who've spent 20, 30 years in the military, retired from the military, and then are moving on, whether that's Army, Air Force, whatever branch of service, and whatever rank, whether it's officers, enlisted, doesn't matter. But when you've spent that much time in the military, I mean, you're kind of walled off from the regular world in a sense, right? Um, you're just not fully engaged with what the commercial world is doing because you're so fully engaged in what you're doing, especially if you spent 20 years doing it. That you don't do that for no reason at all. You're dedicated to your job. So yeah, trying to get people to understand those skills that it takes and those ways of leveraging network effects in order to boost your effectiveness in the job search, in the job market, is it's a very good point. Super, super critical point. Have you ever traveled space A?
No, I have not. But I have done research, right? So one of the things that, well, I have traveled once, but it was kind of like in the military to and from South Korea. So I went through, showed up to the PAX terminal, and after the military, I do have access to the military base. But unfortunately, with 3 kids and a wife, it gets a lot harder to find 5 open seats as opposed to one. And that's the only reason that we haven't really taken advantage of. But I have planned for the upcoming year or two just to maybe do a little getaway, me and my wife, and try to get some space day availability. So what's really awesome that I found is that if you Google space A, or not in Google, if you go on Facebook, a lot of these PAX terminals in New York, Virginia, Kansas, California, they have Facebook groups, and within these Facebook groups, they'll post the itinerary of where they're flying to and when they're flying, so that you can prepare. Most of the time, I think it's 2 to 3 days ahead of time that they'll post out the schedule. So you have a very short window to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. But the more of these space A groups you're able to connect with, that gives you more availability to choose where you want to go to, right? Because not everybody flies to the same locations. So I know close to the Virginia, DC, Maryland area, and in New York, if you want to go to Europe, that's like a hotspot. I forget the base, but there's one in Kansas that flies to Hawaii like pretty often. If anybody wants to take a trip to Hawaii, that would be the one to look for. Or out of California, something like that. There's here in Florida, there's a base in Jacksonville and Key West. They go to Cuba all the time, and it's like, I even consider, hey, I might just take a 2 hour trip, go to Cuba, spend some time, come back, like whatever it is, but just, it'll be something interesting that I can do. Um, so I think it's definitely a great thing to be able to take advantage of if you have the flexibility, and that's something I do consider, that you may be able to fly there. That doesn't mean they're guaranteed to fly right back, right?
Right.
So just be flexible. Have money, saved in case you have to pay extra hotel dates. Understand, what the transportation is, not just on the flight, but when you get there, do you have a rental car? Can you use some other resource or way to get around? So part of the groups is you can ask those questions right now, because there's people that have taken the flights, there's people that are looking to take the flights, and they can tell you how they prepared. Um, so definitely looking up those groups. And part of the group, there's usually a moderator and administrator that works at the PAX terminal. So they'll have some kind of email address on there. You can always email them, tell them your plans, if there's anything they can help with. And it takes a couple of days depending on what time zone they're in, or what kind of missions are going on. But most of the time, they eventually get back to you. So if it's a plan that you want to do it maybe a month or two ahead of time, just connect with those PAX terminal administrators, find out their email, reach out to them, and most of the time you get some good information.
If you could make a post on LinkedIn that would be for sure reaching millions of people across the globe, and you wanted to put a message out to those millions of people, whether it's some advice, whether it's a slogan, non advertisement, in about 2 to 3 sentences, what would that post say?
So I think the topic has been pretty similar throughout our conversation. I would say, first of all, look for someone that can help you to get ahead. Being in the military, we're part of a team, and after the military, you're still going to need a team for anything that you do. Whether it's having a family, raising kids, getting ahead in your career. So I would say look for someone to help you get ahead, and also look for someone that you can help to get ahead. Right? So that would really be my post. You don't only want to look for things that are going to help you, but look for ways that you can give back. Because ultimately, um, I think fulfillment, it's not necessarily about what you have, but what you can give. You get a sense of value by being able to provide value to others, by helping others to achieve their goals, by a sense of importance and fulfillment of, they're going to value that relationship with you. They're going to appreciate what you do for them. They're going to help to connect you with others. So the people that are helping you, show them that you're grateful. Show them that you appreciate their time and their sacrifice and the lessons they've shared, as well as the lessons that you're sharing with others. So look for someone to help you get ahead, and help someone else for you to help someone else get ahead as well. So I would say, if you're the average of the 5 people that you most spend the time with, make those closest 5 connections count. Definitely think about who you're spending time with. Think about the quality of those people. Um, Again, because you don't always necessarily want to connect with others who are sitting around watching TV all day, and I can sit around with other people watching TV all day, and that's really not going to make any difference for my life. I'm connecting with people who are doing the same thing. What's going to help you is, connect with two or three that are ahead of you, and connect with one or two that are behind you, right? And at that point, you're working to move forward together. So there's a few friendships that I too keep in close with, and I value and I appreciate. And we kind of have that mutual mindset, right? That we're all looking to get ahead together, although we're at different stages in life. And we could bounce ideas, do a mastermind of just lessons learned. And one thing that I just want to point out about exponential growth is that if I give you $1 and you give me $1, we're just gonna have $1 between us, right? That doesn't provide for exponential growth. But if you give me an idea that I didn't have, and I give you an idea that you didn't have, now we're both walking away with two ideas each. If you multiply that by 5, if I get 4 people to give me ideas with my own, now I have 5 times the opportunity to grow and implement different strategies, as opposed to something that's tangible that you just give and you take back. So having a mastermind and making those 5 connections count, I think is super super important over the long term.
Any parting words of wisdom, anything that we may not have covered that you would want to mention to the audience?
Yeah, just the last thing, I think it's important to understand the the levels of priority between how you pursue success. So as we mentioned, time is super super important. So understand how you value time would be the first thing that I would mention for someone, anybody getting started, is to look at their life and saying, where am I spending how much time? And is that congruent with where I want my goals to be? Because if you don't make identifying your goals and your time a priority, then you're just going to waste it away, and that's a resource you can never get back. The second thing is, in pursuit of any type of success, your body, your physical health is super, super important, because regardless of how much you may be able to gain financially, once your health is gone, that's another thing that's very, very difficult to get back. So, one of the things that I think it's in a sense of priority, right? It's like a pyramid where you're building on top of each other. You need to have a good foundation. So, however you're spending your time and however you're taking care of your body, that's going to reflect in your ability to perform at a higher level. Because if you go find that job opportunity, but then all of a sudden you're going out drinking every night, you're going out not taking care of your body, you're eating unhealthy, you're not going to be able to perform at that job, at that opportunity to the highest level where you're going to continue to grow. And you're going to be kind of like fighting yourself continuously just to be able to get ahead or just to perform at where you need to be. So, think about your time, think about your health, and think about your mental and emotional stability, right? Because, again, as I mentioned, during the time in my transition in my contract job, I wasn't mentally, emotionally secure to really maintain a good relationship that could have really helped me to achieve better opportunities down the line. Um, that's a huge factor where a lot of people don't think about. They think, you know what, this is just how I am, but they don't ask, is this really how I want it? Is this my goal for my life? And I'll tell you one thing. When I left the military, I had a lot of anger issues, because of time in deployment, because of battles, comrades that they lost their life, and I had to experience their death and their passing, and being part of the honor guard, and the ceremony of what a military service member gets honored, right? But you see their families, you see the broken families, you see the pain that's caused through their departing, and that stays with you, right? So I, throughout my different stages in my career, I had to look back and say, why do I feel angry all the time? Why do I feel that maybe I just can't connect with my wife or with my children, or I just numb things out, and understand that I have to put in the work to be able to get to a stage that now I can be emotionally and mentally resilient to continue to succeed, right? So I think health and mental health, emotional health do go hand in hand. But if you're able to hone in on your physical health, it allows you to really implement the strategies, because physical discipline, it'll bounce off into any other area in your life that you want to perform. So as you start to work in your mental, emotional stability, and emotional health, now you can do deep breathing. Now you can go out for a run. Now you can exercise. Now you can fight off all the mental stimulants that your depression or PTSD or anxiety can actually hold you back from actually performing. So value your time, value your physical health, your mental and emotional health, and then as you get to that neutral or even positive stage, then anything that you decide to do, you will do. Any goal that you want to achieve, you will achieve. Now it's just a matter of getting your resources, making a plan, and taking a massive action.
Very cool. And just the one final thing, where would you want people to reach out to you, or where would you point them to online to come find more about you if they wanted to look?
Yeah, so I'm pretty accessible. People can find me on Facebook if you look up Signal Jobs, Signal Jobs Group or Signal Jobs page. If you go on LinkedIn, you can do the same thing. Signal Jobs is the company that I'm a part of. You can look me up, Andres Blandon, on LinkedIn as well. You can connect with me there. We do have an Instagram page. It's not as active. We try to keep a lot of our relationships and connections professional, mainly through LinkedIn, but it's still there. We post. For a couple of months ago, I actually had a giveaway on Instagram. We gave away some brand new AirPods, and had some good activity with just service members that want to share the word, want to share those things. I might actually do another one for Veterans Day coming up. Considering whether to do a PlayStation 5 or just something cool that people enjoy. But it's my way of giving back, right? So anywhere that you do want to connect, you can look up signaljobs.org. So direct email is admin@signaljobs.org. That'll send us email directly. If you have a resume, if you're looking for any job in particular, or if you're working for a company that wants to hire veterans, I mean that's a great opportunity to take where you are and be able to give back to our military community is by helping us to find companies that want to hire veterans. The company gets tax deductions, incentives, so many opportunities that it will help the benefit overall, as well as the veterans that are transitioning out. So if you're a hiring manager, if you're a director for any organization, you want to connect with veterans, please message me. Again, email is admin@signaljobs.org. I'd be happy to get connected, spend some time, work through how we can leverage our time, our experience, to be able to serve the organization, to be able to give back to veterans. And together, we're going to continue to achieve more over the long term.
That's awesome. So, Andres, let me thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me today, to sit down and talk about some of these topics, and really, really appreciate your insights and your very stable mental processes that you go through. And a lot of these things, it's not so common. Um, and I think we kind of share a lot of the same circles now after talking to you for a couple hours. Some of the same books and thoughts and ideas and mindsets. So it's been a total pleasure to have you, and I'm glad you were able to be here today.
John, thank you so much for having me. Definitely, I'm grateful to be sharing, the lessons in life that I've learned after my transition from military. It's not easy. I don't think anything that's worth pursuing it's going to be easy. It's going to take time, discipline, dedication, and commitment. So we're here again. You don't have to do it on your own. There's a whole team of service members, of people who think alike, who um, just want to achieve more in life and want to pursue a higher level of fulfillment, of joy, of happiness. not just in one area, not just professionally, but through relationships. As I said before, Ty Lopez talks about health, wealth, love, and happiness. And that's really what I want for all the transition service members to be able to achieve the best in each one of those areas for your life.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. Health, wealth, love, and happiness, the 4 pillars of success in life. Great. It was great to talk to you. And for everybody out there in the audience, we will be posting all these 65 pages of show notes that I have here down in the notes section. Maybe we'll drop an alpha. If you've got an alpha for that next giveaway, it might show up in the show notes potentially. Maybe.
Yeah, that'll be great.
We'll see if it pops up. Just keep watching. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for spending the time with us. And thank you, Andres, for spending the time with me. And for everybody out the internet, be safe. If you don't mind and you have time, click the like button, subscribe button, of course, just like we do in normal life. And for everybody out there, take it easy. Have a good one. Talk to you later.